Summer. Long golden days. Backyard barbecues. The smell of sunscreen and freshly cut grass. The sound of children laughing somewhere down the block. Far away, just out of sight. Summer is supposed to be freedom. It's supposed to be warmth and light and safety. The season when the world feels most alive. But not every summer story ends with fireworks and lemonade. Some summers carve themselves into memory like a wound that never fully heals. Some summers swallow people whole. Hikers who never came back down the trail. Campers who disappeared into woods that seemed perfectly ordinary in the morning light. Families who left for the lake and came home, changed. Or didn't come home at all. Tonight, I'm going to tell you 5 of those stories. These are not campfire legends. These are not dramatized fictions designed to give you a cheap thrill. These are real accounts, pulled from police reports, survivor testimonies, documented case files, and the haunted words of people who lived through things they still struggle to explain. Every single one of these events happened during the summer. And every single one will make you think twice the next time you step outside on a warm, beautiful, seemingly ordinary day. So find somewhere comfortable. Maybe turn on a light. Make sure the doors are locked. And whatever you do, don't go outside alone after dark. Welcome to the Scary Collector. I'm glad you're here. And I'm sorry for what I'm about to put you through. Let's begin. Story 1. The last day at Lake Holloway. It was the kind of summer day that makes you believe in God. The sky above Lake Holloway was the kind of blue you only see in photographs. Deep, cloudless, almost too perfect, as if someone had painted it just for the occasion. The Mercer family had been coming to this lake every July for 11 years. It was their tradition, their ritual, their sanctuary from the ordinary weight of the rest of the year. Daniel Mercer, 42, was a high school history teacher from Knoxville, Tennessee. His wife, Brenda, was a pediatric nurse. They had 3 kids, Tyler, 17, Caitlin, 14, and little Noah, who had just turned 8 the week before and had spent the entire drive up announcing that he was, officially, practically a grown-up. They arrived on a Friday afternoon in late July. The rental cabin sat on a private stretch of lakefront. No neighbors within earshot, just the tree line, the water, and the sky. Daniel always said that was the point. No noise. No crowds. Just family. The first 2 days were perfect. Tyler caught a base on Saturday morning and held it up for photos with the kind of pride only teenagers pretending not to care can manage. Caitlin finished a novel she'd been reading for 2 months. Noah discovered that if you ran fast enough and jumped at exactly the right moment, you could do something that sort of, almost, kind of looked like a front flip off the dock. He spent most of Saturday practicing this, shrieking with joy every time he hit the water. Brenda later told investigators that Sunday had started no differently. She remembered waking up to birdsong and the smell of coffee Daniel had already made. She remembered Noah crawling into bed with her around 7, his hair sticking up on one side, demanding pancakes. She remembered the way the morning light came through the thin curtains and made everything inside the cabin glow amber. It was a perfect morning, she said. It was the last perfect moment I remember. The family spent the morning on the lake. Daniel took Noah out in the small rowboat they rented with the cabin. Tyler and Caitlin swam out to the floating platform about 40 yards from shore. A weathered wooden square that had been there for years, bleached white by seasons of sun. Brenda sat on the dock reading, looking up every few minutes to count heads. At approximately 1 in the afternoon, Tyler decided to swim back to shore alone. He was a strong swimmer, had been on his school's team since 9th grade. The swim was nothing. 2 minutes, maybe 3. He told Caitlin he'd be right back, that he was going to grab snacks from the cooler. He got back to the dock. He dried off. He went inside the cabin. He grabbed a bag of chips and 2 cans of soda. When he came back out to the dock 3 minutes later, Caitlin was gone. The platform was empty. The surface of the lake was calm. Tyler stood there for a moment, squinting against the glare. He called her name. Nothing. He looked left and right along the shoreline. He called again. He could see his dad and Noah in the rowboat about 100 yards up the bank, puttering slowly along. He could see his mom on the dock, her book open in her lap, apparently asleep in her CHA. No Caitlin. He assumed she'd gone back in. Maybe swum to shore while he wasn't looking. He went back inside. She wasn't inside. He checked the bathroom. The small bedroom she'd claimed. The porch out back. He went back to the dock. He woke his mother. He looked at the empty platform. And then he started screaming. Caitlin Mercer was 14 years old. She was 5'2", 110 pounds, a capable swimmer, and she had been alone on an anchored wooden platform 40 yards from shore in calm water on a cloudless day. She was never seen again. Search and rescue teams combed the lake for 4 days. Divers went down. Sonar equipment was brought in. They found nothing. Not her swimsuit, not her towel she'd left on the platform, not a single trace of the girl who had been there one moment and gone the next. The towel troubled investigators most. It was a bright orange beach towel, the kind that's hard to miss. It had been sitting on the platform when Tyler left. When the family reached the platform in their boat 12 minutes after Tyler raised the alarm, the towel was still there. Everything was exactly as Caitlin had left it, as if she had simply evaporated. The case generated theories. It always does. Some people pointed to undercurrents in the lake, unusual thermoclines, subsurface channels. A former diver who had explored the lake said there were submerged cave openings along the bottom that no one had fully mapped. Others suggested a medical event, a sudden cardiac episode, a seizure. A few, inevitably, whispered darker things. A person in the water, hidden. A boat they hadn't noticed. A stranger on the opposite bank. None of it was ever confirmed. None of it led anywhere. Tyler Mercer gave an interview 5 years after his sister disappeared. He was 22 by then, in college, quieter than people remembered him being before. He said the thing that stayed with him, the thing he couldn't make peace with, wasn't the not knowing, though that was terrible. It was something smaller. I was gone for 3 minutes, he said. 3 minutes. The chips were right there. The sodas were right there. It shouldn't have taken 3 minutes. It felt like I was only inside for a second. But when I came back, it was already too late. Like something was waiting for me to turn around. Like it knew exactly how long I'd be gone. Caitlin Mercer's case remains open. She was 14 years old. She loved reading, hated math, and could do something that sort of, almost, kind of looked like a front flip off a dock. She has never been found. Tilde 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 tilde. Story 2. The Thing in the Cornfield. There is a particular kind of silence that belongs only to rural America in August. It settles over the land like a physical thing, heavy, golden, pressing down on the fields and the farmhouses and the long straight county roads that go nowhere and everywhere at the same time. It is a silence that feels old. A silence that remembers when there were no roads, no houses, no people. Just land and sky and whatever moved between them in the dark. Marcus Webb knew that silence well. He'd grown up in it. Born and raised in Hardin County, Iowa, he'd spent his whole childhood watching cornfields grow from stubble to towering green walls every summer, and he'd never once thought of them as threatening. They were just crops. Just food. Just the backdrop of an ordinary Midwestern life. That changed on August 14th. He was 31 years old, working as a farmhand on his uncle's property about 6 miles outside the town of Iowa Falls. His uncle, Roy, had gone into town to deal with equipment repairs and wouldn't be back until evening. Marcus was alone on the property with 2 dogs and the kind of open-ended day that farm work sometimes produces. Chores done early, hours to fill. He decided to walk the perimeter of the cornfield. It was something his uncle did every few days, checking for signs of deer damage or disease along the field's edge. It was mindless work, the kind Marcus liked. Just a slow walk in the heat, the dogs ranging ahead, the corn standing 12 feet tall on his right, the tree line 200 yards to his left. He had been walking for about 20 minutes when one of the dogs, a 4-year-old shepherd mix named Porter, stopped dead in his tracks. Marcus had seen the dog freeze like that before, usually around rabbits or groundhogs. But this was different. Porter wasn't coiled and quivering with hunting instinct. He was pressed low to the ground, tail tucked, and he was making a sound Marcus had never heard from him before. A low, almost subsonic whine that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his chest. More like a vibration than a sound. The other dog, a younger beagle named Rue, was already running. Not toward something. Away. Back toward the farmhouse, as fast as her legs would carry her, not looking back. Marcus looked at the cornfield. He said later that he couldn't explain exactly what he saw, or rather, what he didn't quite see. There was movement in the corn about 30 feet ahead of him, along the field's edge. Not wind, there was no wind. Not an animal, or at least not any animal he recognized. The stalks were moving in a pattern that didn't make sense, not parting as something moved through them, but bending inward, as if something on the outside of the field was reaching in, pressing them back, moving along the perimeter in the direction Marcus had been walking. He stood very still. The movement was keeping pace with where he'd been heading, as if whatever was doing it had been walking alongside him, inside the field, just on the other side of that wall of green, the whole time. He couldn't see it. The corn was too dense, but he could see the effect of it. That slow, deliberate, wrongly shaped movement, and he could hear something that he struggled to describe to the county sheriff's deputy who took his report that evening. Breathing, he said. Real slow. Real deep. Way too big to be a deer. Way too slow to be a person running. Just breathing. Like something enormous was just standing there in the corn, right next to me, and breathing. Marcus backed away slowly. Porter stayed between him and the field, still making that low, terrible whine, moving backward with him step for step as if he understood exactly what was happening. When Marcus was about 50 feet from the field edge, he turned and walked. Not ran. Walked, because some part of his brain was insisting, with iron certainty, that running would be the wrong thing to do. He made it to the farmhouse. He locked the door. He sat at his uncle's kitchen table and didn't move for 2 hours. Roy Webb came home at 5:30. Marcus was still at the kitchen table. He told Roy what had happened in a flat, careful voice, the way people talk when they're working hard to sound rational about something that doesn't feel rational at all. Roy listened without laughing. Marcus noted that specifically. Roy was not a man who spooked easily. He'd farmed that land for 30 years. But he listened to Marcus's account and then he was quiet for a while, and then he said, "Which part of the field?" Marcus told him. Roy nodded slowly. "Don't go to that part of the field alone," he said. "I'll tell you the same thing my father told me about that stretch. Don't go there alone. Don't go there at dusk. And if you ever hear something breathing in there, just walk. Don't run. Walk, and don't look back." Marcus stared at his uncle. "What is it?" he asked. Roy looked out the kitchen window at the darkening field. "I don't know," he said. "My father didn't know either. But it's been there a long time. Longer than this farm." Marcus Webb filed a report with the county sheriff's office, not because he expected anyone to do anything, but because he said he needed to tell someone official. The deputy who took his statement did so without comment, which Marcus found either reassuring or disturbing. He still wasn't sure which. He quit working on his uncle's farm 2 weeks later. He moved to Des Moines. He lives there now, in an apartment on the 4th floor, with no fields in any direction as far as the eye can see. He says he still thinks about it. Not with fear exactly, more with a kind of unsettled wonder. A question that has no answer. Whatever it was, he said, it wasn't hunting me. I think it would have had me if it wanted me. It was just watching, making sure I knew it was there. Like it was reminding me, you walk along the edge of something. You don't have to know what's on the other side, but it knows you're there. I think about that cornfield every time I see one on the highway now. Every tall field I pass by. I think about how you can drive past it at 60 miles an hour and think you're seeing the whole thing. But you're only seeing the edge. You have no idea what's in the middle. Story 3. The campground at mile marker 33. Every summer, thousands of people head into the wilderness with nothing but a tent, a sleeping bag, and the comfortable assumption that the forest is just trees. It is, mostly. The 6 friends who drove up to Black Pine State Forest in northern Michigan that June weekend were exactly the kind of people who didn't worry about things like that. They were outdoor enthusiasts, college friends who had been doing a summer camping trip together every year for the past 6 years. They knew how to set up tents in the dark, how to hang a bear bag, how to navigate with a map when their phones lost signal. They were confident, experienced, and completely unprepared for what happened on the second night. The group was Derek and Alicia Fontaine, a married couple in their early 30s. Priya Shankar, a wildlife biologist who served as their unofficial naturalist on every trip. James Okafor, a former army medic who was universally considered the most level-headed person any of them knew, and 2 others. A couple named Evan and Sarah Chen who had joined the tradition 3 years earlier and had blended into the group so seamlessly it felt like they'd always been there. They set up camp at a designated site near mile marker 33, a clearing they'd used twice before, situated on a slight rise above a creek, surrounded by old-growth pines that were tall enough to block out significant portions of the sky. It was a beautiful spot. Quiet. Remote. About 4 miles from the nearest trailhead. The first night was uneventful. They ate well, drank moderately, stayed up late around the fire talking about nothing important. Jobs, relationships, memories from trips past. Priya identified 3 owl species by sound without looking up from her camp chair. James found this deeply irritating in the way that only genuine admiration can feel. They slept soundly. The second day involved a long day hike, 8 miles round trip to a viewpoint Priya had been wanting to reach for 2 years. They got back to camp around 5, tired and satisfied, with several hundred photos between them that none of them would ever fully sort through. Dinner. Fire. The usual. Everything ordinary. Until around 11:30, when Derek noticed the siren. He wasn't sure when it had started. At some point during their conversation, the forest had simply stopped. The creek sounds were still there, water doesn't stop, but everything else had gone quiet. No owls, no insects, no distant animal movement in the undergrowth. Nothing. Priya noticed it at the same moment. She was a wildlife biologist. She knew what that silence meant. Animals go quiet when something threatens them. All of them, at once, when something big enough to threaten all of them is near. Bye. Something's out there, she said quietly. Not dramatically. Just stated it, the way you'd say the weather's changing. Because for her, it was just information. They sat still around the dying fire. 6 experienced adults, listening. Then they heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, slow, deliberate footsteps in the pine needles just beyond the tree line. Moving around the perimeter of their camp. Not through the camp, around it. Like something was circling. Walking the outside of an invisible circle with them at the center. "Bear," James said. His voice was steady. Priya shook her head. She was listening with her whole body, leaning forward. Bears are loud when they move. Branches, snuffling. This is quiet. Too deliberate. Too measured. She was right. Whatever was moving through those trees was moving carefully, thoughtfully, as if it didn't want to be heard, but was slightly too large to achieve it completely. They tracked the sound with their eyes, or tried to. The flashlights caught nothing. Just trees. Just darkness between trees. The footsteps continued their circuit. One full loop. Then another. "How big is it?" Evan whispered. No one answered. The footsteps stopped. 3 minutes of absolute silence. Then they started again, but this time from a different direction. From directly behind Alicia, whose back was to the trees. She didn't turn around. None of them moved. James said he heard breathing. Not the breathing Marcus Webb had described. Not enormous, labored breathing. Something quieter than that. More controlled. Almost human-paced. It stood behind Alicia for what she later described as approximately 2 minutes. She felt it there, not physically, but in the way humans sometimes sense a presence behind them. The prickling of the neck. The ancient animal awareness of being watched from behind. She said she spent those 2 minutes making a choice. She could turn around, or she could not turn around. She chose not to. "I don't know why," she said later. "I just knew, in a way I couldn't explain and still can't, that turning around would be the wrong thing to do. Like the rules had changed, and the most important rule was, don't look at it." The footsteps retreated. The forest sounds came back, first the insects, then the owls, then the creek seemed louder somehow, as if releasing something it had been holding. The animals knew it was gone. The 6 of them sat around the dead fire for another hour without speaking. Then, without discussion, they began breaking down the camp. They packed in the dark, working quietly and efficiently, as if volume might call it back. They hiked out to the trailhead by flashlight, loaded the cars, and drove to a motel 30 miles away where they spent the rest of the night in 2 adjacent rooms with the lights on and the deadbolts thrown. They haven't done a summer camping trip since. What was it? Priya, the scientist, the person least likely to accept supernatural explanations, has spent years thinking about it. She's ruled out bear, deer, and every other native Michigan species she can think of. She's explored the possibility of a person, a stalker, a disturbed individual, and can't dismiss it, but can't confirm it either. "The thing I keep coming back to," she said, "is the circling. Animals don't do that. A predator investigating a campsite is looking for food, for opportunity. It approaches, it retreats. It doesn't walk slow, deliberate circles around you for 20 minutes. That behavior implies something. It implies assessment. Strategy. It implies patience." Story 4. The House That Was Empty. Not all summer horror stories happen in the wilderness. Some happen in neighborhoods that look exactly like yours. Some happen in houses with tidy lawns and clean driveways and welcome mats and ring doorbells that recorded everything and still couldn't explain what was going on inside. Rachel Holt was 44 years old, a school librarian, divorced, with 2 kids who spent most of every summer with their father. This left Rachel with long stretches of solitude in the 4-bedroom house she'd bought in the divorce. Too big for one person, but she couldn't quite bring herself to sell it. It was in Overland Park, Kansas. A quiet, perfectly ordinary suburb. The summer this happened was the 3rd summer Rachel had been alone in that house. She was, by her own description, comfortable with solitude. She wasn't anxious, wasn't prone to imagining things. She slept well, worked her summer library programs during the day, came home, made dinner, watched television, went to bed. It started with small things. The way they always do. A cabinet door she was certain she'd closed, found open in the morning. A chair at the kitchen table, not the one she always sat in, pulled out slightly, as if someone had just stood up from it. The faint smell of cigarette smoke in the hallway near the guest bathroom, though no one who had been in the house recently smoked. She dismissed all of it. She was busy. Houses settle. Memory fails. It was a Tuesday evening in mid-July. She'd been out most of the day, a morning library shift, then errands, then dinner with a friend. She got home around 9, kicked off her shoes, went to the kitchen to get a glass of what? Oh! There was already a glass on the counter. A drinking glass, the kind she had in her cabinet, rinsed clean, set neatly upside down on the drying rack. She stared at it for a full minute. She had not put that glass there. She was certain of this with the particular certainty of someone who lives alone and therefore remembers every object they interact with, every cup they wash, every dish they leave to dry. She had not used a glass that day. She had been gone since 9 that morning. That glass had been put there, washed, rinsed, left to dry, while she was out. She left the kitchen. She didn't call the police. She was already questioning herself, already cycling through explanations. Maybe she'd done it Tuesday morning before work and forgotten. Maybe she was losing her mind. She went to bed. The next day, she installed cameras. For 5 days, nothing. On the 6th day, she nearly deleted the footage without watching it. But she watched it. And there, at 11:47 in the morning, while she was at work, the kitchen camera caught something. A hand. Just a hand, entering the frame from the left, near the cabinet above the counter. Opening the cabinet. Taking out a glass. Then the frame edge cut the rest of the body off, but you could see the hand fill the glass at the sink. Hold it. Be still for nearly 30 seconds. Then rinse it. Set it on the drying rack. Then the hand retreated out of frame. And that was it. That was the whole thing. 45 seconds of footage. A hand. A glass. A silence. Rachel called the police. Officers searched the house, every room, every closet, every crawl space. They found nothing. No signs of forced entry. Nothing taken. The footage was reviewed. It was real. The intrusion stopped, or at least, nothing appeared on camera again. But Rachel told a reporter, "The worst part wasn't finding out someone had been in my house," she said. "The worst part was the glass. They could have stolen something, could have broken something, could have done 100 things to make their presence known, to threaten me. They just got a glass of water and washed up after themselves. Like they lived there. Like they had every right to be there. Like my house was also theirs, and they were just waiting for me to be gone." She sold the house that fall. She lives in an apartment now. No one was ever identified. No one was ever charged. Whoever was in Rachel Holt's house that summer is still, somewhere, out there, being patient. Story 5. What came out of the water? This is the one I've been building toward. The others, as disturbing as they are, have edges to them, boundaries you can trace. This last story doesn't have that. This one is different. The summer was 2019. The location, a stretch of beach on the North Carolina Outer Banks. The time, late August, the final weekend before Labor Day. A woman named Dina Vasquez was there with her sister, Maria, and Maria's husband, Greg. On the 4th day of their trip, Dina went down to the beach alone around 4:30 in the afternoon. She took a book, a blanket, a bottle of water, and her phone. She planned to read until sunset and come back for dinner. She was reading for about 40 minutes when she noticed the man in the water. He was standing about waist deep in the surf, about 30 yards down the beach from her, facing the ocean, just standing there, perfectly still, while the waves broke around him. She noticed him, then went back to her book. 5 minutes later, she looked up again. He was still there. Same position. Hadn't moved. Another 5 minutes. Same. She watched him more carefully now. The waves were significant. 4, 5 feet, rolling in. He was in the surf zone, where the water would knock most people off their feet. He wasn't moving. The waves broke against him and he stood there like a post. Dina stood up. She walked a few steps toward him. "Are you okay?" she called. He didn't turn around. She called again. Nothing. She was starting to wonder if she should call for someone when he moved. He turned around. And Dina Vasquez stood on that beach and looked at him and felt something happen to her nervous system that she has never been able to adequately describe. Not fear. Exactly. Not recognition. Something older than both of those things. She could not identify what was wrong about him. That was the thing that haunted her most. She looked at him and her brain kept trying to process what it was seeing and kept failing. He was the right shape for a person. He had the right number of limbs. He was standing upright, but she couldn't look directly at him for long. Her eyes kept sliding off him, like the image wouldn't hold. It was like trying to read words in a dream, she said. You look at them and you can tell they're words, and they're in the right arrangement. But when you try to actually read them, they won't resolve. They just shift. He wouldn't resolve. He was looking at her. She took a step backward. He took a step forward. Out of the water. Toward the beach. She took another step back. He stopped. Just stopped. At the water's edge. And then he turned around again and walked back into the ocean. Not swam, walked. The water came up to his waist, then his chest, then his shoulders. She could see his head for a moment, just above the surfer. See. Then it went under. He didn't come back up. She waited. 5 minutes. 10. She scanned the water in every direction. The ocean was empty. He was gone. She went back to the house. She told Greg and Maria what she'd seen. She told them not to go look. She didn't call the police. See. She went back to the house. She told Greg and Maria what she'd seen. She told them not to go look. She didn't call the police. I've thought about every explanation, she said. He was disoriented from being in the water too long. He was on something. He was mentally unwell. He was just a person and I spooked myself. I've tried all of those. None of them explain why my eyes wouldn't stay on him. None of them explain the walk back into the water. Not swimming, not wading, just walking, all the way under, and not coming back up for air. None of them explain what I felt when he turned around and looked at me. This was something else. This was the feeling you get when you realize you've been sharing space with something that was never supposed to be in that space. And it knows you've noticed. And now it has to decide what to do about you. She has not returned to the ocean. 5 stories. A girl who disappeared from a lake in 3 minutes. A thing that walked alongside a man through a cornfield and breathed too slowly and too deliberately for any ordinary animal. 6 friends who broke camp in the middle of the night because something with patience and intention circled them in the dark of a Michigan forest. A woman who came home to find evidence that someone had been living, quietly and carefully, inside her life, washing their glass, retreating before she returned, never taking anything, never threatening anything, just being there. And a man, if he was a man, who stood in the surf of the Outer Banks and came to the edge of the water and stopped, and looked, and measured, and went back under. I don't know what connects these stories. Maybe nothing. Maybe the fact that they all happened in summer is coincidence. Maybe summer is just when more people are outside, moving through more unfamiliar spaces, lowering their usual guards because the world feels safer in the light. Or maybe there's something to the season itself. I'm not here to give you answers. What I can give you is the same thing these people gave me. The truth of what they experienced, exactly as they reported it, without explanation, without resolution, without the comfortable lies we usually tell each other at the end of a scary story to make it okay. Because sometimes, not always, but sometimes, it doesn't become okay. Stay safe this summer. Stay in the light. And if you're ever standing by the water, or walking the edge of a field, or sitting around a fire that's starting to die, pay attention. Just pay attention. This has been the Scary Collector. If this kept you up tonight, I've done my job. Subscribe so you never miss a story. And if you have a real experience you'd like to share, reach out. I read everything. Sleep well. If you can.